evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, in our ongoing series of Clarity in Crisis, we'll be talking about women in leadership. Thank you for joining us. With me is my esteemed guest, Dr. Brown, whose years as a psychotherapist and in private practice and a life coach will be very helpful in giving us some perspective on leadership. This is Angie Speaks. My name is Angela Gibson of Angie Speaks, a derivative of Eve Speaks. And why leadership today? Because it's so needed, not just on a global or communal level, but also in our personal lives. As a matter of fact, I believe that's where it must begin. And here on my platform, Eve Speaks, we are deliberate, dogged, and determined to become the next best version of ourselves. And therefore, leading in our own lives, first and foremost, is critical. I saw a quote this week. It says, when you find your wings, you find your way. When you find your way, you'll find your will. There's a number of ways to say that, but essentially it's the idea that we must be deliberate about leading in our own lives. So Dr. Brown, thank you again for joining us. I'm very glad to have you here. How are you?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this discussion.
So today, the topic being leadership, I would want to ask you, Dr. Brown, why do you think it's important as women that we focus on leadership? Why is that important?
Well, it's important for us as well as it is for anybody else. It's kind of hard to get anything done if you are unfocused and if your fearless leader doesn't know what they're doing.
So leading in our own lives is critical. And yes, everything rises and falls on leadership is what I've learned. I'm a big fan of John Maxwell, and that's one of the things that he counsels his followers, that everything rises and falls on leadership. And today we're going to talk about the habits that an effective leader has. I know personally in my own life, I am definitely learning what it is to lead. I'm very much more focused on leading in my own life first, more than leading anybody else per se. I think automatically that may prepare me to lead others, but my main goal is to make sure that I'm leading in my own life. And what does that look like when you're leading in your own life, Dr. Brown? What does it look like? What has it looked like for you?
Well, it means that I'm the captain of my ship. And as such, it's important for me to realize that whatever decisions I make are not only affecting me, but affecting the people who are important in my life.
Right.
I like to do a good job and best for my family. Being a good leader becomes a priority for me.
And can you tell me a time in your life when you felt like you weren't being a good leader and what that looked like? When there's a breakdown in leadership, whether it's in your life or somebody you know, but I want to personalize it first before we spread out so that people can have a visual of what it means to lead effectively and what it means when leadership has broken down in our own life. Because we can talk about other people, we can talk about the government, we can talk about a myriad of things, but if I can personalize it, that would be, I think, very helpful.
Yes, so in my life, I'll start with leaving the service. At that point, I was a single parent. And so I was the head of my household at that point. And so whatever happened, whatever thoughts, feelings, decisions I made significantly affected my family. I'll talk about it later in the habits of highly effective people. But one of the things you have to do to be a good leader is you have to be in control of yourself. And finding myself in the crisis of coming back to civilian life, coming back without my husband who had PTSD and was not able to really be the leader in our family. I'm a Christian, and so, you know, contrary to what popular belief is, I do go by what Scripture says. And what Scripture says is the man is the head of the household, because that's what God said. And so since he was no longer there, I had to take on that responsibility. It was a new experience for me. I'd worked before, I went sorts of things, but I was able to have him as a backdrop. But when he developed PTSD and left, there was no safety net. So therefore, my feelings, my thoughts, all of that contributed to what steps I thought I had to make to be successful in life. And one time I made a mistake. I made a mistake in that I allowed my emotions to overpower me when I encountered a very nasty, racist woman who happened to be my advisor. Oh my God, okay?
So emotions and leadership, that's a whole nother story, how you have to be able to manage them. And what happened in that scenario?
Well, what happened is she had a scenario that I knew she wanted me to follow, not only me, but everybody else. But basically, I felt it denied who I was. And I didn't really take into consideration the full impact of how I responded to her. And had I not back up after I, you know, responded the way that I did to her, which was not rude, it wasn't crude. Basically, I was accepted into Columbia University, and there weren't very many Black people, and especially not, you know, in my field anyway. And so this woman had the idea that whoever came there should come from a very middle-class family. And while I was struggling to maintain that status, that's not where I came from. Right. And I was ashamed of where I came from. And so I didn't play the game. And as a result of that, she told me, I don't know how you got in this place. Oh dear. And despite the fact that I had all medical doctors give me a recommendation to go in. She says, I don't know how you got in this place, but I'm going to make it my business to get you out. And she was serious about that. Well, she wasn't.
How did leadership in your own life apply to that situation?
Well, the leadership applied in that had I been in full control of my emotions, would not have stepped into the pit that she created. And why that was important is it could have derailed my education. She certainly meant to derail my education. And as the leader of my family there, the last thing I wanted to do was be stuck in a ghetto. By the way, I came from Harlem. Right.
So from what I'm hearing from you is that it's important not just to lead by the things that we do, but our emotions. And when a lot of times it's so easy as women to allow our emotions to lead us. I know for myself, that can be a real issue sometimes because my mood can dictate whether or not I do what I'm supposed to do. It can make me respond. I can snap at my children. And so for me, I have to I have to do very practical things to help me to stay grounded, so that because I'm not just leading myself. I have children, I'm married, I run a business. So I understand that when your emotions are out of whack, you stop leading your emotions and your emotions start to lead you, it can certainly cause a major breakdown in your leadership. Are there any other things that we can look to that can cause major breakdowns in leadership as women?
Well, I think I want to start here talking about what Stephen Covey discussed. He did research for a number of years, what it takes to be a good leader. And the first thing that he talks about is what we're sort of gliding over. And that is, you have to know yourself, and you have to be in control of yourself. He calls that being proactive. And basically that means taking responsibility for yourself and your actions. A very difficult thing to do if you grow up in a dysfunctional family. Because if you grow up in a dysfunctional family, pain guides a lot of times how we think, how we feel, how we react. I grew up in a dysfunctional family, and my family was turned into dysfunction when my husband came back with PTSD. It was crazy dysfunction. So that meant I was in a lot of pain.
Right.
But we have to take control of that pain. And most times it's not a thing that, first of all, we even realize. Because if we've lived with that pain for a long time, after a while, we think it's normal. We think that's the way life is.
That's true. And now, would you say that we are born as leaders, or it's a decision that we have to make? Would you say that there is this belief? Because I think that sometimes people think that you have to be born a leader in order to be able to lead. What is your take on that?
Well, there is a thought that true leaders are born. They have certain personalities. I think there's some validity to that.
But can they be nurtured? Say I wasn't born a leader. I'm not a leader by nature. Can I be developed? Can I become a leader?
Yes, I think we have choices.
Okay.
In life about everything.
Because it's easy to think that, well, I'm not the leader, so I don't have to take the lead in a particular situation. But it's a decision, is your point. Is that correct?
The first place that you take the lead, or at least you should take the lead, is in your own life.
Right. Because
if you don't take the lead in your life, somebody else will. In fact, most of education, especially public education, and especially in, I would say, poor neighborhoods and maybe low-level neighborhoods, maybe even higher. Most of education is to gear you towards being a follower. A follower who will get out there and make money for other people. And so, with few exceptions, of course, but I think the bottom line is that there are enough books out there, there are enough people out there, and if that is where you want to go, then certainly your hereditary abilities don't have to interfere with you being a good leader. I think it's mostly being motivated to do that, and then being willing to take the steps to do it after you've addressed your issue. Throughout this whole pandemic, since I've been on the program, I've been talking about the importance of taking care of yourself.
Right.
And so if you're talking about a leader, that's just something you have to do. And if your early pain told you that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve it, any of these things, it becomes your responsibility to take the steps to work on those things. And if you don't, then you're probably not going to be a good leader, because more than likely you're going to blame everybody else for issues rather than taking responsibility. The leader's job is to take responsibility. And so therefore, you have to know yourself. You have to understand other people. You have to listen to other people. And a lot of times, pain doesn't allow you to listen. What pain does is allows you to try to take control. And no one wants
between taking control and there's a difference between taking control and leading. Because a lot of times people think that when you're in control, you're leading.
Well, when I talk about taking control, I'm talking about dominating people and not caring about who they are, what they want. It's just all about me. Because I have this pain and because I'm angry with the whole world, I don't care about other people, and you just do what I want to do. You do what I tell you to do. That is an awful leader.
And the question becomes, is that really leadership? That's something else. So from what I get from you, one of the first habits is to be proactive. Proactive in my own life. For the people watching, the first components of being an effective leader is to make sure that you are proactive by leading in your own life. For myself, making the decision to quit my job and not accept somebody telling me that if you were in India, they would have paid you $30,000 for the year, and as a cold caller, and send you home is an example of me saying, no, I am worth more than that. I contribute more than that. There's more for me. And deciding to leave my job was an example for me in terms of taking a leadership role in my own life and being proactive. It means different things for different people, would you say, Dr. Brown? But it's still the idea of taking action, being proactive in your own life.
Well, it's taking action, but what he's talking about here is taking responsibility. See? If you make a mistake, if you're wrong, admit it. And and don't blame, and stop blaming everybody. When you're talking about trying to be a leader, you need to have resolved your mama issue, your daddy issue, your boyfriend issue, your self-esteem issues.
All the issues.
Those pains that come out of hurt. If you be an effective leader, you have to take responsibility and be proactive, not wait for other people to fix you up.
Nobody can patch you up. You have to. Well, sometimes, I think that in order to lead other people, then you need to go get yourself fixed. So somebody may have to patch you up. You may have to go get help before you can be in a position to lead. So that's part of the process, right? At least that's what I believe.
You take responsibility to go and get the help, whether it's therapy, counseling, whether it's a coach. In other words, you don't wait for other people to tell you you have a problem. You initiate and do your own self-assessment, and not by yourself. You can there are many people around you know who you are. All you have to ask them, and most times they'll tell you.
They'll tell you. Okay, what else do you need to do in order to be an effective leader?
Most people don't want to hear, let's say, hopefully it's constructive criticism. Most people, especially if you've been hurt, you want to think you're okay. And it's everybody else's problem.
Everybody else's problem. Okay, what else do we need to do to be an effective leader in our own lives?
You have to begin with the end in mind, according to Covey, with his 7 habits. And
sometimes you can't even see down the road, much just to think about the end in mind. Now, life is so crazy. I mean, it sounds nice and cute, but Exactly how do you do that? I mean, think about this pandemic. It's like crazy.
What he means by when he says begin with the end in mind is you have to know where you want to go.
Okay.
You know, do you want to go to Alaska or you want to go to Hawaii? If you're saying you want to go to Hawaii, you shouldn't be on the road to Alaska. You need to know where you want to go. What do you want in life?
Oh, that's what he means. So I need to know what I want. And if I don't know what I want exactly, there's got to be a methodology of me finding out how to figure out what I want.
Well, there is. And then counseling comes in. Also, well, I would say counseling because most people who are in that place where they're confused and haven't even thought about what they want, from my experience, it has been people who have not had the support that they needed growing up, you know, for any number of reasons that we talked about. Maybe parents are overworked, maybe they have mental problems, any number of reasons. And so the easiest place to go is to some professional. You know,
and it ties back into the whole idea of being proactive, because if you can't figure out what you want, but you know that you're stuck, well, assuming that you're aware that you're stuck, then you will be proactive and go get the help so you can know where to start, so you can begin with the end in mind. So it seems like it all goes back again to leading in your own life by being proactive. So it kind of ties right back into the first one.
Yes. So, you know, I think about myself. I told you I came from a dysfunctional family. Fortunate for me, I attended Catholic school and I learned discipline. That's another thing too. You need to be disciplined if you want to be a leader. And so I was able to show up and produce what I needed to produce in school. And that meant that teachers took an interest in me. And when they took an interest in me, I asked questions. And some of the times I didn't even know what questions to ask, but they gave me answers. And from there, I took it to go and read books. I wanted to be successful. I did not want to live in the ghetto, okay? Enough of it.
You say that, this is the second time you said that at the show. You know, we just started. You have an issue with living in the ghetto. But you know, when I was growing up, there's a popular belief that it's not where you live, it's how you live. What do you have to say about that?
I say that's BS, okay? It doesn't matter where you come from, you make it. But if you decide to live in the ghetto with a ghetto mentality, you are not going to make it very far.
Wow. Okay.
Need a mindset change.
But you can live in the ghetto and still have the mindset change, because there are a lot of people living in the ghetto. They can't afford to get out right now, but their mindset should be to get out, right? That's what you're saying. Because I grew up in the ghetto partly. What my mindset was, I need to lead in my own life. I think a lot of times people don't realize that it's their responsibility to take responsibility to lead in their own lives. So I'm not going to say that if you live in the ghetto, you can't really, you know, it can't happen. You can't lead effectively. I don't know if I believe that.
Well, what I said, okay, is if you live in the ghetto, which is living with lack of everything.
Okay. That's a great definition. Living in the ghetto is living with lack. Wow. Okay.
Disconnected from the main society. You're learning habits, you're learning survival habits that work there, but they may not necessarily, and most times don't work in other places.
Wow. Okay. So we have to get rid of, is it possible that I could live in a posh neighborhood and still have the lack mentality?
Yes. I had a lady that was a client. She was a client of mine. She lived in Massachusetts, right near Harvard University. She lived in a very, very nice area. The problem was her father was an alcoholic, and his first love was his alcohol. And so his family lived in almost abject poverty, meaning that if people in the community didn't organize to help the woman, she wouldn't have stayed there very long. She would have went into poverty. And the stress of it was so much on her that every single year she went to Harvard for them to fix her heart. Every year she had a heart attack.
Oh my.
This is how her children grew up, thinking, oh my God, is this going to be the time when my mom doesn't make it? And to eat, to pay the rent, I mean, these were great neighbors. They were wealthy people. They could afford to help, and they did. But apart from living in a house that looked posh, their inner life was poor.
The inner life was poor.
Yes. In other words, they lived constantly in lack. They didn't fit in anywhere.
There's something about that whole scarcity mindset. I realized in my own life that when I come from a place of scarcity, as opposed to believing that God owns the universe, that anything is possible in my life, I don't achieve much. I don't lead in my own life because I'm not believing that the world is abundant. But once I changed my mindset and start believing that, okay, you can have enough, you can have, and I can have, and we can all have, then I realized that it puts me in a whole different mindset and a mental frame, and I can lead it effectively as well in my own life. To not operate from a scarcity mindset. So you begin with the end in mind. First, to be an effective leader, you have to be proactive. You got to begin with the end in mind. And what's the third thing that we have to do in order to lead in our own lives, to be an effective leader? Because as John Maxwell says, leadership, everything falls and rises on leadership, starting with ourselves.
Yes, I want to go back to number 2, and then we'll finish and go to number 3. Beginning with the end in mind is important, because if you don't know where you're going and you're trying to climb the ladder, by the time you get to the top of the ladder, if you're not in a place where you belong, you're going to be extremely unhappy. And that's really important. So,
okay, that makes sense. So it's almost 6:30. So let's. So
the third one is put first things first. And the easiest way to do that is you have to learn to say no. You can't say yes to everything. And one way that I find is helpful of doing that is consider when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to a whole bunch of other things. And try to think about, do you really want to say no to those things?
Wow, first things first. Because everything can sometimes feel important, right?
Well,
sometimes it can feel like that.
People want to make their issues important.
Everything is not urgent and everything is not important.
It's important to them. However, you know, that's why you need to know where you're going.
Right.
And when people come into your life, you need to know whether those people are going in the same direction as you or not. And if they're not going in your direction, they're going to be urgently wanting to go in a different direction, which derails you.
Right. Which ties back into the second point, which is that we must begin with the end in mind, and which ties back into the first point, which is that we must be proactive in our lives in order to lead in our personal lives. Okay. These are the 7 habits of highly effective people.
that we're discussing, right?
That we're discussing.
The fourth one is think win-win. That's a big one. And especially, again, you know, the business of being hurt. It's not all about you.
But I thought it was all about me. I mean, how do you know when you're thinking it's, because you're not necessarily going around thinking it's all about me. How does it manifest yourself into yourself that you think it's all about? How will you know? Because, you know, sometimes you're just living. You're not thinking it's all about, I'm not thinking it's all about me. I'm just living. So what are the cues that somebody can use to, you know, to determine whether or not they're so self-absorbed and thinking, whether consciously or unconsciously, that it's all about them? How do you know?
Do I care about other people, or do I only care about myself?
Do I care about other people, or it's just all about myself? Okay, that sounds nice.
Basically, it's a question of learning to be cooperative rather than wanting your own way.
Okay.
You're always looking for what's mutually satisfactory for both people, or all involved, not only what I want.
I know in my marriage, I better think win-win, otherwise we both lose. Yeah, win-win is very important in relationships, for sure. Okay.
And the fifth thing, the fifth point is seek first to understand. Most people want other people to understand where they're coming from, and that makes sense. But for the most part, people are not going to pay attention to you if you don't pay attention to them.
Wow. Seek first to understand. Yeah, it's a tendency for me to want someone to understand me, but it takes me a while to realize I need to step back, to listen long enough to try to understand them. That really takes some training, actually. Yeah. I still work on that in my own character, where I'm willing to, where I have to make sure that I'm listening with my children, especially, because it's easy for me to tell them, just tell them what to do. Just go clean your room. Go pick up that, go do this. But sometimes they're going through something that I know nothing about, because I've never raised a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old before. So it becomes important that I am thinking about how to understand them. Like, I'm giving them space to let them feel understood. That mommy hears you, mommy is listening to you, mommy values what you have to say. Otherwise, all I have is really a robot, do what I say. And then later on, they become resentful.
Well, so, they become resentful, but something else happens too. Now they don't think for themselves.
No, they don't what?
Don't think for themselves.
They don't think for themselves.
You see? And that's a formula for certainly not moving ahead. They'll move in the direction that other people want them to move, more or less. Right. That may not be the best thing for them.
Makes sense. Okay. What's another point?
The sixth point he made, he calls it synergy. What he means by that is basically 2 heads are better than 1. You need to engage in teamwork and be open-minded and focused on problem solving, not all the number of things that we know happen sometimes in business. You know, when we go for a team meeting and everybody's so bored, oh God, when is this going to be over with? Because whoever is the chief has their own agenda, and they don't really care about what other people think. They just have the people there to tell them what they want done.
In other words, you're saying collaboration is important. Is that what I'm hearing?
Work, same thing.
Okay. I find that a collaborative atmosphere is definitely more effective anyway, because I lead a team of people, my business, and I find that when I give everybody the opportunity to say what they they think about a project, or whether or not they agree or disagree, or what input they have, it just creates an atmosphere that allows the team to move forward. So synergy or collaboration is definitely critical, not just in the workplace, but clearly in my household for sure. When we're all like on the same page, okay, let's go outside and play some basketball or jump rope, and everybody's on board, we move the family forward together. So collaboration or synergy is definitely, I've seen that play out. I see that play out almost every day, actually. Again, we're talking about effective ways to lead in our own lives. And as women, a lot of times to lead in our own lives, we have to understand what the effective habits are. And that's what we're going through. Okay, we're going to go to the last habit now in order to lead effectively in your own life. And this doesn't just apply to women. We just happen to be women. So what's the final point in how to lead effectively as a woman?
So Stephen Covey calls it sharpen the saw. And this is what we have been doing throughout the whole pandemic.
Sharpen the saw? Is that what you said?
Sharpen the saw. Yes, that's what he calls it.
How do you sharpen the saw?
That is self-renewal of yourself, your physical self, your spiritual self, your soul.
Sounds like self-care.
Exactly.
Self-care has been an ongoing theme during this series of Clarity in Crisis. You want to tell the audience again, what does self-care look like before we go today?
Self-care looks like physically taking care of yourself, eating properly, exercising, resting. A must.
Yes. I had 2 hours of sleep today. It felt so good. Working out, jumping the rope helps too. I do that. Yes. So that's how we sharpen the saw. Sometimes we're just going, and we don't realize that we need to take the time. And I've done that. And you take the time just to spend time with me. And in my own, on this platform, eSpeaks, we're very focused on personal development and personal growth. And really, it's hard to lead in my own life, or for anyone to lead in their own lives, if they haven't taken the time to invest in personal development. And that's why Dr. Brown is offering, during this period of COVID-19, to give us more clarity in Christ, in this crisis, of how to really set ourselves up to win, to lead in our own lives, to not wonder what happened, when it happened, or how it happened, but to be aware of what's going on around us and how to adapt, how to pivot on purpose so that we can really make the strides that we need to make to lead in our own lives. Because we really can't lead anybody else until, at least for myself, I can't lead anybody else unless I'm leading my own life. And so these 7 habits of how to do that is really helpful. And more than anything else, I'm realizing that when you lead in your own life, during this season especially, you are ahead of the curve so that you're not caught off guard. I mean, I know no one could have been prepared for the pandemic, not in this way. I mean, I never thought this was possible. But if you're leading your own life, you're not caught off guard and scrambling at the last moment to figure out how you're going to make things, how you're going to survive, because you'd have been leading in your life all along. And in order to do that, you have to take into consideration some of the things that you mentioned today, which is to be proactive, to begin with the end in mind, to put first things first, to think win-win, to seek to understand so that you're letting other people feel heard, to have a synergistic kind of relationship with people, to be collaborative instead of thinking it's all about you. And sharpening the saw, which I think is really critical, really working on ourselves. Do you have any last thoughts, Dr. Brown, about sharpening the saw?
Yes. Well, one of the things that I'm doing now to try to help people sharpen the saw, at least from an emotional point of view is I've started a group having to do with forgiveness. And that's absolutely crucial. It's crucial because when you don't forgive, you have emotional problems, you have physical problems, you have spiritual problems. So I hope that people consider joining that group.
And how do they get in touch with you, Dr. Brown?
Okay, they can reach me at averyspecialplace.net.
Can't hear you.
Yes.
You can reach her at veryspecialplace.net, and on Instagram, it's asked_Dr. Mom. If you want to join that forgiveness group to sharpen the saw. I like that.
As well as GLOWN, GLO-N.com, glowin.com.
That's awesome. Again, here on Eve Speaks platform, our goal is to help you to heal, aspire, and grow so that you can lead in your own life. Also, please pick up my book, Peace Beyond the Splinter, Reclaim Your Promise of Peace and Profit from Anxiety's Grip Through Prayer. I believe that when we are deliberate in overcoming our splinter or personal splinter, we certainly will be able to lead in our own life. Because again, when you find your way, you find your will. And when you find your will, you find your wings. And isn't that what we want to do? We all want to fly. So thank you for joining us today. Please like and share this video. And you may join us in our community group, Angie Speaks, Stronger Than Splinter. Until next time, we will catch you in another episode of Clarity in Crisis. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for being here. We really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.